The quaint town of Fulton, Ohio was rocked by a disturbing crime in the summer of 2016. On a seemingly ordinary day, 20-year-old Sierah Joughin set out for a leisurely bike ride with her high school sweetheart Josh Kolasinski. Sierah was a lover of life's simple pleasures, and she relished in the serenity of the cornfields that surrounded her and the quality time she got to spend with her boyfriend. But as the sun began to set and dusk quickly approaching, Sierah told her boyfriend that she needed to get back home. As she kissed him goodbye and set off for her short journey back, few could imagine the horrors which she would encounter on her way. Sierah never made it home that night, and it seemed she'd vanished without a trace, leaving her loved ones with more questions than answers. The mystery only deepened when a sharp-eyed cop stumbled upon something suspicious in the cornfields just half a mile from her home. Upon closer inspection, the officer discovered a collection of disturbing clues. Laying in the cornfield were Sierah's abandoned bicycle, her sunglasses, and a collection of eerie objects that suggested a struggle had taken place. They found a screwdriver laying on the ground, along with a second pair of sunglasses and a motorbike helmet which seemed to have blood on it. But with no sign of the young woman herself, the authorities intensified their search, convinced of their suspicion that foul play was involved. 3 days after Sierah Joughin disappeared, a gruesome discovery was made in a small, shallow grave nestled in the vast cornfields of Fulton. There, police found the young woman's lifeless body, hogtied, bound, and gagged, with a rope connecting her handcuffed wrists to her feet. Sierah's dignity was further stripped away as she was found in only her underwear and wearing an adult diaper. The sheer horror of the scene left no doubt that a sick and twisted individual was responsible, and the police launched an all-out manhunt to bring the killer to justice. This is the disturbing true crime story of Sierah Joughin. Sierah Joughin was born on February 11, 1996, in Sylvania, Ohio. As the firstborn child, she quickly became the center of her parents' universe, the very essence of their love. As time passed, the Joughins welcomed 4 more additions into the family, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. Sierah remained their first little girl, cherished and adored. As she grew up, Sierah blossomed into a confident and adventurous young woman, with an infectious smile and a happy, upbeat attitude that would always bring out the best in those around her. She graduated from Evergreen High School, before going on to university to study business at the University of Toledo. As the summer of 2016 rolled around, Sierah was eagerly preparing for her junior year of college and pursuing her dreams of a career in human resources. While living in the rural confines of Fulton County, a tiny Ohio town with a population of only 40,000, Sierah planned to complete her degree remotely. Her uncle's business offered her the chance to work as an intern where she would be able to gain invaluable real-world experience. Life for Sierah seemed to go exactly as she planned, and her life was on an upward trajectory, with her future looking bright and full of promise. But then came that fateful day of July 19, 2016, when everything would change in the blink of an eye. Tuesday, July 19, 2016, was an especially hot day in Fulton, Ohio. It was the kind of day that made you want to stay inside with the air conditioning on full blast. But Sierah was different. She had just bought a new bicycle from a local garage sale and was itching to take it for a ride. So despite the scorching heat that radiated off the rural Ohio landscape, she decided to pedal her way over to her boyfriend Josh's house, who lived about 7 miles away. Sierah and Josh had been dating for 7 years already, and they were the kind of couple that spent nearly every day together, and this day was no exception. They planned to spend the day just hanging out and taking a scenic bike ride through the cornfields of Fulton. As they cycled down the dusty roads, the hot wind whipping past them, they couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom and adventure. The landscape stretched out before them, a tapestry of green and gold, and they were just 2 tiny figures carving their way through it. At around 6 p.m. and with dusk quickly approaching, Sierah knew that it was time to head back home before the veil of darkness enveloped their surroundings. Josh drove with her halfway back to her house before giving her a kiss and parting ways. Sierah promised to text him as soon as she got home and give him a call before she went to bed. But as he watched her silhouette fade into the distance, he was unaware that this would be the last time he ever saw her again. At around 9:30 p.m. that evening, Sierra's mother returned home from an evening class. To her surprise, the house lights were all turned off, a clear indication that Sierah wasn't home yet. She would always inform her family if she planned to stay out late or sleep over at Josh's house, But at the time, her mother wasn't too concerned, thinking that she was probably still with Josh and that he would most likely drop her off shortly. But then at about 10:30 p.m., an hour after first arriving home, her mom got that dreaded telephone call. On the other end of the line was Josh Kolosinski, who asked to speak to Sierah. With a sinking feeling in her gut, she told him she thought that Sierah was with him, but Josh's response left her reeling. He confirmed that Sierah had been with him earlier in the day, but that she left at around 6:30, and he'd been unable to contact her since. She was not responding to his messages, and her phone was going straight to voicemail. Her mother's heart immediately dropped, and she feared for the worse. Fulton was a quiet town, with quiet country roads, and there was no reason for Sierah not to have arrived home. And combined with the fact that her phone was turned off, things became very worrying. That very same evening, the family contacted the police and reported her missing. When police started taking statements from those closest to Sierah, it was confirmed that the last known person to see her was her boyfriend, Josh Kolosinski. Police paid close attention to his version of events, and after confirming that his story checked out, they quickly cleared him as a suspect. With no other leads in the case and with time ticking by, it seemed that the investigation had hit a brick wall. But just when it seemed all hope was lost, a glimmer of light appeared. The police, desperate for leads, resorted to the old-school tactic of pounding the pavement and knocking on doors, hopeful of finding someone, anyone, who could shed some light on the case. Their persistence finally paid off when one neighbor had a story to tell, a story that could hold the key to the case. He told police that he had been driving along the same road where Sierah was last seen, on the very day she vanished. As he passed a patch of roadside, his eyes were drawn to something unusual, a lone motorcycle helmet lying discarded on the ground. Without a second thought, he stopped to pick it up and took it home with him. The neighbor handed the helmet over to the police, and when it was inspected closer, it was confirmed that the helmet had some bloodstains on it, and what was even more concerning was that the amount of blood and the composition of the splatter suggested that it may have been used as a weapon. This discovery only added to their concerns for Sierra's safety, and the search for the missing girl intensified. The clock was ticking, and the police knew time was of the essence. With door-to-door investigations taking too long, they had to come up with a plan to narrow their search. So they compiled a list of all the known convicts in the area and decided to pay them a visit, one by one, hoping someone would be able to provide them with the information they needed. Their journey brought them to a 3-acre property on the outskirts of Toledo, where 57-year-old James Worley resided with his mother and brother. Worley operated an engine repair business from his home, but something about him set off the officers' alarm bells. As they approached him to clear him as a suspect, they were met with an unexpected level of resistance, and the officers could sense they were onto something big.
Who are you?
Yeah, we work on that violent crime task force.
Okay. So,
And I'm with the state.
okay. So you guys got some suspicions for something here. So you're gonna tell me that this is all under the guise of just checking every household, and you're not here for any particular reason.
There's a young lady. Is there anybody in the house but your mother?
Just my mom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why we couldn't go in and look?
What part of the house do you want to look in?
We'd like to look through the whole house.
Killed anybody in? Good answer.
Well, believe it or not, being cooperative was always good.
Yeah, right.
As the authorities questioned James, he appeared on edge and defensive, but as they pressed him for answers, he revealed a surprising fact. He was familiar with the area they were searching, having experienced a motorcycle breakdown in that very place earlier that day. He told them that he misplaced his fuses, sunglasses, screwdriver, and helmet. This rang very loud alarm bells for the police, who promptly detained him. As the police conducted their search of his property, they stumbled upon a trove of disturbing items. Along with an arsenal of weapons and ammunition, they found rope, tape, zip ties, and handcuffs, the telltale tools of a predator. But what they discovered next was even more horrifying. Concealed beneath stacks of hay in one of James's barns was a hidden chamber, a makeshift dungeon of unspeakable horrors. The police could barely contain their shock as they peered inside, wondering what atrocities had taken place within its walls. Restraints were fastened to the walls, and a carpeted freezer stood in the corner. Upon closer inspection of the freezer, they found stains that appeared to be blood. They also found several pairs of women's underwear, one of them with unmistakable bloodstains. Sierra's DNA was discovered on a piece of duct tape and an inflatable mattress, undoubtedly placing her on the scene. The pungent smell of cleaning chemicals and bleach only added to the ominous atmosphere, and James was taken in for questioning. Although police were certain that James knew where Sierra was, he was unwilling to provide any information to authorities and instead maintained his innocence. However, only 3 days later, on July 22nd, the Fulton County Sheriff located the body of Sierah Joughin just 12 miles from James Worley's house. A farmer stumbled upon a suspicious patch of dirt on his property and quickly alerted the authorities. When they arrived, they found the grisly remains of Sierra in a shallow grave. She'd been hogtied, gagged, and was wearing a diaper. A short while after this discovery, police arrested James Worley. He was charged with murder, kidnapping, abduction, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse.
Just senseless that somebody could do something like that.
The communities of Delta and Metamora are stunned at this tragic turn of events.
Because we're a rural community. Everybody rides their bicycles. Everybody enjoys the country life.
I want to express my heartfelt condolences to Sarah's family. At this time, our investigation will remain ongoing, but we do anticipate additional charges against the suspect.
The trial began in March 2018, and the state put forward its case. They said that on July 19th, according to his search history, James spent the entire day watching porn videos. Later in the day, he decided to go for a ride on his motorbike. As he was driving along County Road 7 in Delta, Ohio, he saw Sierra on her bicycle just after she left Josh at about 6:45 p.m. He then drove ahead of her, got off his bike, and hid in the cornfields. When she cycled past, he jumped out and hit her with his motorcycle helmet, causing her to fall into a ditch, and then dragged her into the cornfields along with her bike. Here he tied her up and gagged her. While she was tied up in the cornfield, he actually called his brother to ask for a lift back to his place because his bike apparently broke down. When his brother arrived, he didn't see anything odd, and he gave him a lift back home. James then drove back to the cornfield in his van, and then threw Sierra into the back of his truck and drove to his barn, where he carried out unspeakable acts of violence against her. Traces of Sierra's DNA were found on the mattress, underwear, and duct tape, while James's DNA was also present. He also gagged her with a dog toy, applying so much force that it broke her tooth, leading to her suffocation. However, James vehemently denied all the allegations against him, claiming that the so-called makeshift dungeon found by police was actually an amateur porn studio he was setting up. He even went so far as to suggest that the gags, ropes, and women's underwear found on the premises were just props. James also tried to explain away the discovery of his helmet at the crime scene as a mere coincidence, insisting that he had left it behind after his bike broke down. As James's trial continued, even more chilling revelations came to light. It turns out that this wasn't the first time James had been involved in a violent incident against a female. On July 4th, 1990, a 26-year-old woman was riding her bike down country roads in Fulton when she was suddenly struck down by a truck. James then emerged from the truck with a screwdriver in hand and forced her into his vehicle. As he was attempting to put handcuffs on her, the woman managed to escape and run for her life. Luckily, a passing motorist saw her distress and came to her aid. James was eventually convicted on abduction charges and served 3 years of a 4 to 10-year sentence. But that was not the end of his troubles with the law. In 2000, he was sent back to prison for growing marijuana and possessing a firearm while on disability. As the trial progressed, even more disturbing information came to light. Recordings from James's sister suggested that he had been a suspect in at least 2 other murders, including the disappearance of a 14-year-old girl back in the 1980s. Police refused to comment on the possibility of James being linked to these crimes, but the implication hung heavily in the air. It was a shocking reminder that James's crimes weren't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of violence that had gone on for decades. James Worley was eventually found guilty of all charges against him, and the jury recommended the death penalty, a fitting punishment for the horrific crimes he committed against Sierah Joughin. But as the time for his sentencing drew near, Worley had one last chance to speak his mind. He launched into a 45-minute speech proclaiming his innocence. He directed much of his speech towards Sierra's family, taunting them with twisted and inappropriate comments, bizarrely claiming that he doesn't understand why she wasn't raped.
First and foremost, I want to say that myself, my family, everyone that I know is heartbroken for the Joughin family. Make no mistake. Don't ask me why she wasn't there. She was a beautiful girl, but she wasn't, and I'm glad.
In July 2020, Worley's attorneys filed a motion to overturn his conviction and grant him a new trial. They argued that the government had failed to prove key aspects of the charges and that the jury had been tainted by their familiarity with Worley and the case. Despite the efforts of Worley's lawyers, the appeal was denied by the court, and an execution date of May 20th, 2025 was set for Worley.